Cathal stood in the observation deck of the Valine diplomatic vessel, watching the human ship approach through the vast darkness of space. His eyes tracked every detail of the strange craft. It looked different from Confederation ships, where Vine vessels were smooth and elegant. The human ship bristled with unusual structures and what appeared to be weapon ports. The vessel was named Defiant, which Keith's translator rendered as something close to refuses to submit. An odd name, he thought. The Vulian Confederation had maintained peace across 200 star systems for 3,000 years. They achieved this through careful diplomacy, strategic retreat, and an absolute commitment to avoiding violence. When threatened, they simply moved. Space was infinite. Why fight over one world when 1,000 others waited empty among the stars? Humans were different. They had achieved faster than light travel only 20 years ago, yet already they were making noise across known space. They explored aggressively, spoke bluntly in diplomatic channels, and worst of all, they refused to back down from confrontations. The Confederation Council debated their application for membership with genuine concern. Some argued for acceptance, hoping to civilize these newcomers. Others wanted to quarantine the human home system and wait for them to mature. A few, including Keithal's superior, suggested careful observation first. That was why Keithal now waited to board their vessel. As the Confederation's leading expert on warfare and military history, he studied conflict across hundreds of species. Most intelligent races evolved past their violent tendencies within centuries of achieving space travel. The Valine themselves had fought wars long ago before wisdom prevailed. Perhaps they could be guided toward peace. Docking procedure completed with a series of mechanical clanks that echoed through the hall. Keith gathered his recording equipment and walked toward the airlock. His skin shifted to a calm blue color, the Valine equivalent of a respectful greeting. The airlock door opened with a hiss. A human woman stood on the other side, flanked by two others. She was tall by human standards, with dark skin and eyes that seemed to evaluate him instantly. Her uniform was military in nature, decorated with symbols he didn't recognize. She extended her hand in the human greeting gesture. Captain Nicole Grant, commanding officer of the Defiant. Welcome aboard, Observer Keithal. He touched her hand awkwardly, still unused to the human custom. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. Humans ran hot compared to most species. Another oddity. Thank you for accommodating my request, Captain. Most species considered this gesture aggressive, but humans used it to express friendliness. We're happy to have you. Let me introduce my senior staff. This is Danny Wright, my pilot, and Lisa Moore, chief engineer. The pilot was a young man with an easy grin and relaxed posture. The engineer was a woman with oil stains on her hands and an intense expression. Both greeted him with the same casual friendliness. Their captain displayed, Keithal found it unsettling. In Valian culture, military personnel maintained strict formality. These humans seemed almost playful. Captain Grant led him through the ship. The corridors were narrower than Confederation standard, lit with harsh white light. Crew members passed constantly, all moving with purpose. Many called greetings to their captain, who responded by name. She knew them all apparently. The ship felt alive with energy. Your quarters are here. Grant said, opening a door. Small, I'm afraid, but functional. Will be departing in 3 hours for patrol duty in the outer sectors. You're welcome. Anywhere on the ship, except engineering. Section 3, which Lisa assures me will kill you with radiation if you're not wearing proper shielding. Understood. May I observe bridge operations? Absolutely, that's why you're here, right? To see how humans operate. She paused. I'll be honest, observer, I know the Confederation has doubts about us. I know you're here to evaluate whether we're too dangerous for membership. I respect that. All I ask is that you judge us fairly. Keith's skin flickered yellow with surprise. Such directness was unusual. I will record only what I observe, Captain, nothing more. 3 hours later, Keith sat in a small seat near the bridge's rear wall, watching the crew work. The pilot, Danny Wright, sat at his console, fingers dancing over controls with practiced ease. The tactical officer, a serious young man named Jake Peters, monitored weapon systems and sensors. Captain Grant sat in her command chair, calm and present. Jump in 3, 2, 1, right, announced. Space twisted. Keith's stomach lurched as it always did during faster than light transitions. Humans seemed unbothered when normal space reasserted itself. They were in a different star system entirely. Sensors clear, Peters reported. Wait. Contact, picking up a distress signal. It's Confederation standard emergency frequency. Grant leaned forward. Location, third planet. The signal is weak, automated, looks old, maybe weeks. Could be a trap, Grant said quietly, or it could be someone who needs help. Right, take us in slowly. Peters. Weapons ready, but do not lock onto anything unless I give the word. Let's see what we're dealing with. The ship moved toward the planet. Keith watched the captain's face. She looked alert but not afraid. The crew worked with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no dramatic declarations, just professionals doing their job. As they approached the planet, sensors revealed debris in orbit, a Confederation science vessel torn apart. Peters reported no life signs. Grant ordered a detailed scan anyway, searching for survivors. Even though the rational choice was to move on, they found none. Weapon signatures match Crick swarm, Peter said, his voice tight. They were here maybe 2 weeks ago. Keith's skin went pale gray with fear. The Crick swarm, a hive mind species that consumed entire worlds, breaking down all organic matter to feed their endless reproduction. They had been quiet for decades, but if they were active again, notify Confederation command. Grant ordered, send them everything we have. This is their space, their responsibility. Observer, are you familiar with they? Crikes, yes, he managed. They are the reason the Confederation expanded. Slowly, carefully, we avoid their territory, they avoid ours. Balance. Balance, Grant repeated. The words sounded strange in her mouth. They just killed an entire science crew, civilian researchers. When does balance become cowardice? Before Keith could respond, the communication console chimed. A priority message from Confederation command. Grant accepted it. The message was brief and devastating. 3 Confederation worlds in the outer sectors were in the Cry's projected path. Evacuation was underway. All military vessels were to assist with civilian transport. No defensive action would be taken, Captain. Grant's jaw tightened. She dismissed the message and sat silently for a long Moment finally she spoke. Right, said. Course for the nearest threatened world. Best speed, our orders are to assist. Evacuation only, she said. I know what. Our orders are, Lieutenant, but I also know what's right. Those worlds have billions of people. We have to try. Keith's skin flashed red with alarm. Captain Brant, the Confederation has decided to fight the Cricks is suicide. Your single ship cannot save everyone I know. She looked at him directly. But we can try, we can stand. Maybe we die trying, but at least we tried. Can your Confederation say the same? The bridge fell silent. Kath realized he was witnessing something the Confederation had forgotten. He was seeing what species looked like before. They learned to always run. He was seeing courage. The Defiant traveled through hyperspace toward the threatened worlds, and Keith spent his time observing the crew. What he saw confused him more each day. These humans knew they were flying toward danger, yet they seemed almost cheerful about it. In the mess hall they told jokes and laughed. In the corridors they shared personal stories. At night music played from crew quarters, sometimes sad, sometimes energetic, always emotional. Keith found Lieutenant Commander Eric Stone in the ship's small library reviewing tactical data. Stone was the first officer, second in command after Captain Grant. He was older than most of the crew, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. May I join you? Keith asked. Stone looked up and smiled. Of course. Observer, pull up a chair. I'm just reviewing what we know about cracks. Tactics, not much unfortunately. They don't negotiate, don't communicate, they just consume. Keith settled into a chair designed for humans. It fit poorly, but he managed. Commander Stone, may I ask you something? Your crew seems unconcerned about the danger ahead. Do they not understand what the Cricks are? Stone leaned back, considering the question. They understand perfectly. They're scared, most of them, but humans learned a long time ago that fear is just information. It tells you something is dangerous. It doesn't tell you to run. I do not understand. Let me tell you about human history. Observer Stone pulled up a display showing Earth. Our planet is what we call a death world. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that killed millions. Humans didn't start at the top of the food chain. We climbed there over thousands of years by refusing to quit. Other animals were stronger, faster, had better weapons built into their bodies. We just had stubbornness. The display showed images from human history. Battles, wars, conflicts spanning millennia. Keith watched humans fighting with primitive weapons, then advanced ones, always fighting. We had a war once that lasted 30 years, Stone continued. Another that killed 60 million people. We fought over land, resources, ideas, religions. We've done terrible things to each other, but we learned something important from all that blood. We learned that some things are worth fighting for, and we learned that the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. Your species has never known peace. Stone laughed, but it sounded bitter. We've known peace, we treasure it, but we don't confuse peace with surrender. The Confederation runs from the six. That's not peace, that's just slow defeat. Later, Keith visited the medical bay, where Dr. Amy Collins was preparing for potential casualties. She was a small woman with quick hands and a focused expression. When he asked to speak with her, she continued working while they talked, I wanted to understand human biology better, Cathal explained. Your physical capabilities seem unusual. Collins pulled up a human medical scan. We're persistent hunters observer, see. These, she pointed to various systems. Our bodies can regulate temperature. Through sweating, we can run for hours. Without stopping, our pain response can be overridden by adrenaline and willpower. We're not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the smartest, but we don't quit physically. We're built to just keep going, she showed him scans of human brain. Chemistry, when humans face danger, our bodies flood with chemicals, adrenaline increases strength and speed, endorphins block pain, cortisol sharpens focus. We literally become more capable when threatened. Most species have a freeze or flight response. Humans have fight or flight, and we choose fight more often than is probably wise. Cathal stared at the data. These creatures had evolved to be warriors. Their own bodies were designed for conflict. No wonder the Confederation feared them. 5 days into the journey, alarms blared through the ship. Peter's voice came over the intercom. Captain 2. The bridge, we have contact. Cathal followed Captain Grant to the bridge, his skin pale with anxiety. The main display showed a small creek. Scouting force, 3 ships smaller than the Defiant but moving fast. They've detected us, Peters reported, changing course to intercept. Grant's voice was calm. Battle stations launch fighters. Danny put us between them and that civilian transport. She pointed to a sensor reading showing a Confederation evacuation ship fleeing the area. Captain, we could jump away, Stone suggested. Those fighters will catch the transport before we can. We stand. Grant looked at her crew. Everyone ready? The response came from every station. Ready, Captain. Keith watched the Defiant launch 4 small fighter craft, human pilots in tiny, fragile ships. The fighters moved to intercept the Crick's vessels, and space erupted with weapons fire, energy beams, and projectiles crossed the darkness. One fighter took a hit. The pilot's voice came over the radio, calm despite obvious damage. Chris Baker here. I'm hit. Engines are gone. Still have weapons. Pull back, Chris. Grant ordered. We and LT Unc and GT LL cover you. Negative. Captain, I can still help. On the display, Keith watched the damaged fighter change course. It accelerated toward the nearest Crick ship, moving faster and faster. Stone understood. First, Chris, no, tell my brother I said hi, Chris said. Then his fighter impacted the 6th vessel at full speed. Both exploded in a flash of light and debris. The other human fighters used the opening to attack the remaining 6 ships. Within minutes, both were destroyed or fleeing. The civilian transport jumped to safety. The bridge was silent. Captain Grant sat very still, her hands gripped tight on her chair arms. Finally, she spoke. Casualties? Just Chris, Peters reported quietly. He was 23 years old, Grant said to no one in particular. He likes terrible music and made awful coffee. He told jokes that weren't funny, and he just gave his life for people he never met. She stood. We and LT Unc and GT LL hold a memorial service tonight. Right now we keep moving. Those people on the threatened worlds need us. Cathal found he couldn't speak. He had just watched a human deliberately kill himself to save strangers. The Valine would never do such a thing. Life was precious. You preserved it, protected it. You didn't throw it away. That night, The crew gathered in the main cargo bay. Captain Grant spoke about Chris Baker. She told stories about him, the funny ones and the serious ones. Other crew members spoke too. They cried, they laughed, they remembered. At the end, Grant said something that Keith recorded carefully. Chris understood what we're doing out here. We're not just exploring space, we're proving that someone will stand against the darkness, someone will fight. The Confederation has forgotten that lesson. We're going to remind them. The crew responded together, their voices unified. We stand. Keith returned to his quarters and reviewed his recordings. He was beginning to understand something terrible and beautiful. Humans were dangerous, yes, but not because they loved violence. They were dangerous because they loved others more than they loved safety. They would die for strangers. They would charge into certain death if it meant protecting the helpless. The Confederation saw this as primitive behavior. Keith was starting to wonder if the Confederation had just forgotten what civilization really meant. It wasn't about avoiding conflict, it was about knowing what was worth fighting. For he thought about Chris Baker, 23 years old, ramming his fighter into an enemy ship to save people he would never meet. He thought about Captain Grant leading her crew toward overwhelming odds because it was right. He thought about the whole human species, violent and stubborn and absolutely unwilling to back down. And for the first time in his long life, Keith wondered if the Vine had made a terrible mistake by choosing endless retreat over courageous resistance. Peace was valuable, but peace bought with the blood of abandoned innocence might not be peace at all. It might just be cowardice with a pleasant name. The Defiant emerged from hyperspace into chaos. The star system containing Velora Prime was already under attack. Crick's vessels filled the sensors, hundreds of them swarming like insects around the peaceful world below. 6 billion Valorans lived on that planet. The Confederation had declared it lost and evacuated only government officials and those wealthy enough to bribe their way onto transport ships. Everyone else was left to die. Captain Grant stood on the bridge, her face carved from stone as she studied the tactical display. 7 other human ships had answered her call for volunteers. 8 ships total against a fleet of hundreds. Keith's skin had gone completely gray with terror. This wasn't courage, this was suicide. Fleet status, Grant said calmly. Stone read from his console. Destroyer Relentless under Commander Kevin Hayes. Cruisers Steadfast and Valiant. Frigates Courage, Liberty, and Hope. And the supply ship Endurance. They're waiting for your orders. Captain Grant opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Grant. I won't lie to you, the odds are terrible. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and the Confederation has already written off this world, but 6 billion people down there are still alive. They're still hoping. Someone needs to stand for them. It might as well be us. She paused, then continued. Here's the plan. Relentless will draw the main Crick's force into the asteroid field at grid 77. The rest of us will hit them from 3 sides once they're committed. We'll use nuclear weapons, kinetic strikes, and if necessary, ramming attacks. We make them pay for every meter of space we buy. Time for the Valorans to evacuate themselves. Questions. Commander Hayes's voice came through, steady and calm. How long do we need to hold? 12 hours. Minimum. That's how long it will take for civilian ships to launch from the Major cities, Relentless is ready. The other ships confirmed their readiness. One by one, Keith listened in horror. They were planning to fight for 12 hours. Against overwhelming odds, it was impossible. The battle began with haze, and the Relentless charging directly at the Crick's formation. The destroyer was fast and heavily armed, and it fired continuously as it moved. Crick ships turned to pursue, drawn away from the planet. Hundreds of them, all chasing one ship. Now Grant ordered all ships. Attack pattern Grant 7, focus fire on their command vessels. The human fleet emerged from behind Valera Prime's moon and opened fire. Energy weapons and missiles filled the space between ships. Keith watched the tactical display, seeing human ships moving in coordinated patterns he had never seen before. They fought like a pack of Earth predators, covering each other, striking weak points, never staying still. The six fought back. Their weapons were powerful, their numbers overwhelming. The Frigid Hope took heavy damage in the first minutes. Its hull breached in 3 places, but it didn't retreat. It kept firing. Hope is venting atmosphere, Peters reported. They're reporting 70% casualties. Grant's voice was tight. Tell them to fall back. They refuse. Captain Monroe says they can still fight. On the display, the crippled Hope changed course. It moved toward a cluster of Crick's vessels and detonated its entire nuclear arsenal at once. The explosion consumed the frigate and 26 ships. Keith felt sick. He had just watched another ship full of humans die deliberately. How many? 200. Crew members, 300, all dead in an instant, but the sacrifice worked. The 6 formation broke. Human ships pushed through the gap, targeting the larger command vessels. Without their command ships, the smaller vessels became confused and less coordinated. The Defiant shuddered as Crick's weapons struck the hull. Alarms blared. Hull breach on deck 4, someone reported. 6 boarding pods detected. Grant didn't hesitate. Security teams to deck 4, seal the section and repel boarders. Keith followed the security team, unable to stop himself. He had to see. The team was led by Sergeant Paul Martinez, a thick-built man with cold eyes and a massive rifle. The team moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency. They reached deck 4 and took positions. The Cricks came through the breach like a flood. They were insected creatures, all claws and mandibles and hunger. Each one was the size of a human, fast and vicious. There were dozens of them. The humans opened fire. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. 6 fell, but more kept coming. Martinez never stopped firing. When his rifle emptied, he drew a pistol. When that emptied, he pulled a blade from his belt. Keith watched in stunned horror as the sergeant fought 6 drone in close combat. The creature was stronger. It's natural weapons deadly, but Martinez was faster, smarter, and absolutely unwilling to quit. He stabbed the drone repeatedly until it stopped moving, then immediately turned to help his teammates. The fight lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, all the Cricks were dead. 4 humans were wounded, 1 seriously. None had retreated. They had stood there, ground, and won through sheer determination and violence. Martinez helped his wounded teammate to medical, then reported to the bridge. Deck 4 is secure, Captain. No Creek survivors. Casualties. Nothing that will stop us fighting, ma'am. Hours passed. The battle became a grinding nightmare. Human ships took damage, suffered casualties but never stopped fighting. The destroyer Reliant was torn apart by concentrated Kriegsfire. Commander Hayes kept fighting until the last moment, then rammed his dying ship into a Kriegs command vessel. His final words were simple: "Tell my wife Katie I kept my promise." The line holds. The cruiser steadfast lost power and drifted. Helpless, the Kriegs swarmed it. Rather than be consumed, the captain ordered. The ship scuttled. The crew evacuated in pods while the ship self-destructed, taking a dozen Kriegs vessels with it. Pilot Danny Wright had been flying combat missions for 8 straight hours. Keith watched him at the controls, hands steady despite exhaustion. The young man's eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, but he never slowed down. Engineer Lisa Moore worked in sections of the ship that were leaking radiation. She wore protective gear, but Keith knew she was being exposed to dangerous levels. When he asked why she didn't let someone else handle it, she just looked at him like he was crazy. "These are my engines, my ship, my responsibility." The battle raged for 18 hours total. Keith lost track of time. He just watched these incredible, terrifying humans fight beyond any reasonable limit. They fought when wounded, they fought when exhausted, they fought when any rational being would surrender. Finally, the Kriegs withdrew. The human fleet had lost 4 of 8 ships. 3,000 humans were dead, but the Kriegs vanguard was shattered. Their command structure broken, and below on Valora Prime, civilian ships were launching. Millions of Valorans were escaping. The bridge of the Defiant was silent except for the sound of alarms and damage reports. Captain Grant sat in her chair, blood running from a cut on her forehead. She looked at the display, showing Valoran ships fleeing to safety. "We held," she said quietly. "We held." Keith realized he was shaking. He had just witnessed something the Confederation claimed was impossible. Small force had stopped a larger one through courage, sacrifice, and absolute refusal to back down. The humans had lost more than half their fleet, but they had won. The Defiant drifted in space, too damaged to jump to hyperspace until repairs were completed. Keith wandered the broken corridors in a daze. Everywhere he looked, he saw exhausted humans. Some slept at their duty stations, too tired to make it to their quarters. Others worked on repairs with mechanical determination. The medical bay overflowed with wounded, and Dr. Collins moved between them like a ghost, treating injuries despite her own exhaustion. The ship's memorial wall had been expanded. New names covered an entire section. Commander Hayes, Captain Monroe of the Hope, hundreds of others. Each name represented a life deliberately given for strangers. Catherall stood before the wall for a long time, trying to process what he had witnessed. He found Captain Grant in the observation deck 12 hours after the battle ended. She sat alone looking out at the stars. Her uniform was torn and blood-stained. She had refused medical treatment until every other crew member was cared for. Now she just sat silent and still. Cathal approached carefully. "May I join you, Captain?" She nodded. Without looking at him, he sat down in a nearby chair. They sat in silence for several minutes before Keith spoke. "I must ask you something. I have watched your species fight for weeks now. I saw Chris Baker sacrifice himself. I saw Commander Hayes do the same. I watched your crew fight beyond any reasonable limit. Why do you do this? Why do you die for strangers?" Grant was quiet. For a long moment, when she spoke, her voice was tired but firm, because we have the power to help. And choosing not to use it makes us responsible for what happens. The Gricks were going to kill 6 billion Valorans. We could try to stop it, or we could run. Like the Confederation did. Running would have been easier, but it would have been wrong. She turned to look at him. My species learned something important during our history. Observer. We learned that evil wins when good people do nothing. We had genocides on our world, wars that killed millions. We had moments where people stood by and watched atrocities happen because getting involved was dangerous. Every time that happened, we regretted it. We promised ourselves we would never be bystanders again. But the cost, Keith said, 3,000 of your people died. 4 ships destroyed. For what? You saved some Valorans, but the Confederation has already abandoned dozens of worlds. You cannot save them all. No, Grant agreed. We can't save everyone, but we can save someone, and that matters. Every life we save matters. Kevin Hayes knew he was going to die when he rammed that command ship. He did it anyway because it was right. That's what makes us human. We don't calculate odds when lives are at stake. We just do what needs to be done. She stood and walked to the window. Confederation built their entire civilization on avoiding conflict. They retreat, they negotiate, they sacrifice worlds to preserve the majority. They've forgotten something important. Evil doesn't stop just because you run from it. It follows, it grows, and eventually you run out of places to run. Keith all felt his skin shift through several colors as emotions he couldn't name washed through him. What are you saying? The 6 aren't done. Observer. This attack was just a probe. They were testing defenses, learning how the Confederation responds. And what did they learn? They learned that nobody fights back, that they can take whatever they want. Grant pulled up a data display. We recovered this from a destroyed Crick's command ship. Our intelligence people have been analyzing it. The Cricks are gathering a main fleet. They're planning to sweep through Confederation space and consume everything, and they're going to succeed unless someone stands against them. The data showed projections, fleet movements, and target worlds. Keith stared at it in horror. This would destroy the Confederation entirely. Yes, because the Confederation won't fight. They'll retreat world after world until there's nowhere left to retreat to, and then they'll die. Keith's mind raced. You must warn them. Give them this data. They need to prepare defenses. I'm sending them everything we have, but it won't matter. The Confederation Council will debate and discuss and ultimately decide that fighting is too costly. They'll choose managed retreat over resistance, and billions will die because of it. She looked at him directly. I know you're going to file a report about us, about humans. I know you'll tell the council everything you saw, and I know they'll reject us from membership because we're too violent, too aggressive, too willing to fight. That's fine. We don't need their approval. We just need to do what's right. Keith spent the next several days preparing his report. He included everything: the tactical data from the battle, the human casualties, the Cricks intelligence about the coming invasion, and his own observations about human nature, their capacity for sacrifice, their absolute unwillingness to abandon the helpless. He transmitted the report to the Confederation Council and waited. The response came 3 days later. The Council thanked him for his thorough work. They praised humanity's noble sacrifice at Valora Prime. They acknowledged the Crick's threat and promised to increase evacuation preparations, but they rejected humanity's application for full membership in the Confederation. Humans were too unpredictable, too violent, too dangerous to integrate into peaceful society. Instead, they offered restricted membership with limited rights and no say in council decisions. Captain Grant received the council's decision while the Defiant was still undergoing repairs. She read it, then deleted it without comment. Stone found her later. What are we going to do? Captain, we're going to do what humans always do, Eric. We're going to stand. The council offered us scraps. I declined. If they won't fight with us, we'll fight alone against the entire Crike's fleet. That's suicide. Probably, but it's also right, and that's enough. Keith listened to this conversation from the doorway. Something inside him broke and reformed into a new shape. He had served the Confederation for 60 years. He had believed in their philosophy of peace through retreat, but he had watched humans die for strangers. He had seen them fight against impossible odds and win through sheer determination. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Captain Grant, he said, stepping into the room, I wish to request political asylum with humanity. Both Grant and Stone stared at him. I cannot serve a government that abandons the helpless. Keith continued, I cannot return to a confederation that chooses comfort over courage. If you will have me, I would like to stay, to observe, to learn, and perhaps to stand with you. Grant smiled, and it wasn't the polite, diplomatic smile from their first meeting. It was genuine and warm. Welcome aboard, Keith, permanently. This time, news of Keithal's defections spread through diplomatic channels. Within a week, 3 other Confederation observers requested asylum with humanity. Within a month, 2 mere Confederation worlds succeeded and declared alliance with Earth. Valora Prime was one of them. The Valoran ambassador's message was simple. The Confederation abandoned us. Humanity stood for us. We know who our true friends are. The Confederation Council was furious, but they could do nothing. Humans had not violated any laws. They had simply refused to accept cowardice as policy, and now others were following their example. 3 months after the battle at Valora Prime, Keith stood on the bridge of the human carrier Washington, watching the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled prepare for departure. 32 warships filled the space around Earth. 50,000 humans crewed those vessels. Every single one was a volunteer. Every single one knew they probably would not return. Keith had spent those 3 months learning everything he could about humanity. He studied their history, their culture, their wars. He learned about soldiers who charged into machine gun fire at places called Omaha Beach and Normandy. He read about tiny forces holding against massive armies at Thermopylae and the Alamo. He studied human philosophy about duty, honor, and sacrifice. More he learned, the more he understood. Humans were not violent because they loved war. They were violent because they loved peace enough to fight for it. They understood that freedom and safety had to be defended, that evil would not stop itself, that someone had to stand in the gap between darkness and light. Admiral Grant commanded the fleet now. She had been promoted after Valora Prime, given authority over all human military forces. she stood on the Washington's bridge, looking at the assembled ships with quiet pride. Final status report, she ordered. Stone, now her second in command for the entire fleet, read from his console. All ships report ready. Carriers Washington, Independence, and Lexington. Battleships Warrior, Guardian, and Defender, cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels all prepared. We also have 3 Valor and defense ships and 2 frigates from the Talmer system. The alien ships were small additions to the fleet, but their presence mattered. They proved that humanity's example was spreading. Other species were remembering what it meant to fight back. Civilian evacuation status, Grant asked. Confederation is moving slowly, as expected. We've sent our own transport ships to help. We estimate 3 more weeks before the primary systems are clear. We buy them 3 weeks. Then Grant opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Grant. In a few minutes, we're going to jump to the Creek staging grounds. We're going to attack their main fleet before they can launch their invasion. Intelligence estimates they have 10,000 ships gathered there. We have 32. She paused. The bridge was silent. I'm not going to pretend we can win this fight. Conventionally, we can't, but we don't need to win. We need to hurt them badly, enough that they can't launch their invasion on schedule. We need to buy time for billions of civilians to evacuate. Every hour we hold is thousands of lives saved. Every cries ship we destroy is one that won't reach a populated world. Her snort's voice strengthened. I know what I'm asking. I know most of us won't make it home, but I also know that every person in this fleet volunteered for this mission. Knowing the odds, you're here because you understand that some things are worth dying for. The safety of billions of innocents is one of those things. Hathal listened, his skin flickering through colors of emotion he had never felt before. He wore a human uniform now, though it fit poorly on his frame. He had a station on the bridge as an observer and advisor. He also had a human rifle, though he barely knew how to use it. If the Washington was boarded, he would fight. He had learned that much from humanity. I want to tell you a story, Grant continued. When I was young, I asked my grandfather why he joined the military. He had fought in Earth's final World War, seen terrible things, lost friends. I thought he would tell me about duty or honor. Instead, he said something simpler. He said, because I could help, and that meant I should. That's what we're doing today. We can help, so we will. She looked around the bridge, making eye contact with each crew member. The line holds. Say it with me. 50,000 voices responded. Across the fleet, the line holds. Jump. In 3 minutes, Stone announced. The crew moved to their stations. Danny Wright sat at the helm, older now with new scars. From Velora primed, Lisa Moore monitored the engineering displays, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. Dr. Collins prepared the medical bay for the casualties she knew were coming. Keith found himself standing next to a young Marine named Scott Palmer. The human was barely 20 years old, checking his rifle with practiced movements. Are you afraid? Keith asked. Palmer looked at him and grinned, though his eyes showed the truth. Terrified, but I'm here anyway. That's what courage is, right? Being afraid and doing it anyway. Why did you volunteer? You could have stayed on Earth, lived safely. The young Marine shrugged. My little sister is 7 years Old, she's never seen war, never had to. Be afraid, I want to keep it that way. If dying today means she stays safe, then that's a good trade, such simple reasoning, such profound sacrifice. Keith all felt something shift in his understanding. This was why the galaxy would never defeat humanity, not because they were unkillable or invincible, but because they simply would not quit. They would die rather than abandon their values. Jump in 30 seconds, right? Announced 32 human ships and 5 Allied vessels, all facing the same direction. Keith thought about everything he had learned about Chris Baker ramming his fighter into an enemy ship, about Commander Hayes keeping his promise as he died, about Captain Monroe choosing destruction over surrender, about 3,000 humans who gave everything at Valera Prime, about 50,000 more who are about to do the same. 10 seconds. Right said. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Space twisted. The fleet jumped. They emerged in the Crick staging grounds, and Keith's breath caught. The intelligence reports have been accurate. Thousands of Cricks vessels filled the system, a swarm of dark ships preparing to sweep across Confederation space. The human fleet was a tiny drop in an ocean of enemies. All ships, GRD said calmly. Attack. Formation Grand Omega. Target their command ships first. Make every shot count, and remember what we're fighting for. The fleet spread out and accelerated. The 6, surprised by the sudden attack, scrambled to respond. Human ships opened fire, missiles and energy weapons reaching across the void. The battle began. Keith watched Admiral Grant command the fleet with precision and courage. He watched Danny Wright fly the massive carrier like it was a fighter, dodging Crick's fire with impossible skill. He watched Lisa keep the engines running despite damage that should have shut them down. He watched Dr. Collins save lives with determination that refused to accept death, and he understood this was why the galaxy trembled before humanity, not because they were monsters or conquerors, but because they represented something the other species had forgotten. They were the universe's reminder that intelligence meant nothing without courage, that advancement meant nothing without the will to defend it. That peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of people willing to fight for it. The Cricks thought they were attacking humanity. They were actually awakening something far more dangerous. They were reminding the galaxy what predators looked like when they decided to hunt. Washington shuddered as Crick's weapons found their mark. Alarms blared. Fire broke out on Deck 7. Marines rushed to fight Crick's boarding parties. Keith gripped his rifle and moved to help them. As he ran through the corridors toward the sounds of fighting, he thought about his old life in the Confederation, safe, peaceful, comfortable, and ultimately meaningless, because that peace was built on the suffering of those they abandoned. He thought about his new life with humanity, dangerous, violent, uncertain, and profoundly meaningful, because these people fought for something bigger than themselves. Keith reached the barrage where Marines fought Craig's drones. Scott Palmer was there, firing his rifle with mechanical precision. The young man who wanted to protect his little sister. Keith raised his own weapon and joined the fight. Hours later, battered and exhausted, Keith all stood with the Marines as they cleared the last 6 from the ship. Palmer had been wounded but survived. The young man grinned at Keith all through the pain. Not bad for your first fight, observer. Not an observer anymore, Keith all replied. Just a Soldier like you, the battle raged for 3 days. The human fleet was slowly destroyed ship by ship, but they took hundreds of Crick's vessels with them. They shattered the enemy's command structure. They bought time. On the 3rd day, as the Washington began to fail, Admiral Grant gave the final order: all remaining ships. This is Grant. We've done what we came to do. The Crick's invasion is delayed by months. Billions of civilians have time to evacuate. All ships are authorized to withdraw if able. It has been an honor to serve with you. Only 7 ships remained functional enough to jump to safety. The Washington was not one of them. Grant ordered the crew to evacuate pods while she stayed at her station. Stone refused to leave, so did Wright. Moore and Collins, so did Keith. You could go, Grant said to him. You don't have to die here. Keith's skin showed calm blue, the color of peace. I learned from humans that some things are worth dying for. This is one of them. The line holds. Grant smiled. The line holds. The Washington made its final attack run. With engines failing and weapons exhausted, the massive carrier simply rammed into the largest remaining Crick's command ship at full speed. In the moment before impact, Keith recorded his final observation. He spoke clearly, knowing someone might find the recording someday. I came to humanity as an observer, tasked with evaluating whether they were too dangerous for galactic society. I learned they are dangerous, profoundly so, but not because they love violence. They are dangerous because they love others more than they love themselves. They will die for strangers. They will march into impossible battles if it means protecting the helpless. The galaxy trembles before them, not from fear but from shame. They remind us what we once were before we chose comfort over courage. I watched humans march into battle, and I finally understood the only thing truly dangerous is a species that refuses to do the same. The 2 ships collided. Light consumed everything. 3 months later, at Confederation headquarters, the Council received reports that changed everything. The Crick's invasion had been delayed indefinitely. Their command structure was shattered. Dozens of their worlds were rising in rebellion, freed from the control of destroyed command ships. The threat had not ended, but it had been broken, and across Confederation space, something remarkable happened. Species that had retreated for generations began to fight back. They formed defensive packs. They built fleets. They drew lines and declared they would hold them. Humanity had shown them the way, and though most of the human fleet had died in the Crick staging grounds, their sacrifice had ignited something that would burn across the galaxy for generations. The age of endless retreat was over.